Okay, Dax token drop Friday afternoon. So we're here with Dr. Sarah Luger. And I just met Sarah a couple of weeks ago through a mutual acquaintance. I'm very glad I did because I got to talking to her and I just felt that she had a really interesting wealth of knowledge and takes on AI that I thought would be interesting to have her on our podcast. And she's graciously agreed. She is basically her background as she has a PhD from the University of Edinburgh, and she's an LLM AI safety and evaluation expert. She's also a generative AI research director. And I think one of her really interesting projects was that she worked at IBM on Watson for the Jeopardy challenge. Well published, and really, it was been a pleasure talking to her over the past couple of weeks. So maybe I was just thinking about these the other day. That we hear a lot of terms in AI that are have kind of emotional connotations. Trust, safety, ethics. Ethics, for example, these are tied to an emotion, and LLMs don't have emotions. Obviously, it's an algorithm. So, what in the context of AI, what do these terms mean in the context of AI?
Thank you. And thank you for the warm welcome. It's very kind of you to have me on, and I'm looking forward to an interesting chat. So, I think the discussion around AI, trust, ethics, safety, naming conventions is a really important one because before ChatGPT and the LLM wave hit, there was some concern around AGI. There was a little bit of chat about AGI, especially in Silicon Valley, and around the ethics of AI. Now, ethics, to Sunil's point, is a term that's more associated with philosophy than perhaps one of the hard sciences. I would also argue that it's a core, important topic of our humanity about what we believe is wrong and right. But the term these days, I think is seen as more positional. Like these are my ethics and that's someone else's ethics, right? And so then when we moved from ethics to responsible, I think that was an effort to have a broader umbrella for maybe shared what do we think is the correct or right or wrong approach. And then we've moved to trust and transparency. We want to be able to build systems where we can trust the output. And this is a line, there's a through line here, right, between these words. But what I think is really interesting is of late, the power of generative AI has led many people to understand failures, errors in AI systems are really safety based, right? So this is a security style development. Think of this as around a cybersecurity level uh, importance in a company. And I think that you could look at this and say, AI ethics was maybe a nice to have many years ago that said that maybe you were um, a European company who was really had very strong brand values and you really wanted to align with your customers in a very specific way. And I think that's a very different group than today is saying, I want to have secure AI, safe
Well, what is
AI.
safety? What does safety and security mean? I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, I think that one of the ways to discuss safety is to say, if by using this product, can I can I open myself up to harm that is
Mhm.
unreasonable, right? And I think unreasonable is the waffle word that we could really we could spend a
Yeah.
lot of time on. But the the image that one of my friends uses to describe how AI products are being sold globally is imagine buying a car in the United States and it has full functionality, seatbelt, brakes. But that car, that same car, that is sold in West Africa, the seatbelt doesn't work
Mhm.
because the product doesn't work with the language in this case that it's being used, right? So what is there? Is there a difference in the actual functionality that makes it unsafe? And when we think of using the internet in every nation has a certain level of curation. There's standards. And right now, AI safety is often associated with, are there harms that can be produced by these large language model systems that would be unreasonable compared to what you would get in the open web? And I think that we could dig into what you can find at a library, what you can find in parts of the web. But I think there's an availability and a just-in-time delivery of some of this information that is really striking, and it feels like it's more powerful, whether because it's at our fingertips in a very different way. Does that help clarify?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
But I think it brings to my mind, I think you spoke about ethics, safety, and trust. And I think these words have different meanings when you go across different cultures,
100%.
different countries. And how do you, I mean, there's no standard definition of um, some of the terms that you just described. So,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
now we see models emerging from so many different countries. I was just looking at some statistics on Open Router.
Hmm.
They're saying now increasingly a lot of business traffic in the United States is being directed towards models from outside the United States.
Hmm.
So, and those models may or might not have gone through the same, verification, validation, certification processes. So, what does that mean for us?
Well, I think that it's a great opportunity. You know, this is the capitalist mindset. This is a great opportunity to differentiate and to sell products that do lean into what different customers want. Now, your comment about community is a very, very important one. What is a hazard in the West? So, for example, at ML Commons, I've worked on the AI Luminate evaluation, which is um, a a benchmark that allows the main model builders, well, anyone can work with us with their model to evaluate how it performs against the 12 standard hazard categories that Meta introduced many years ago. So these categories are in themselves Western United States of America based. There are different concerns in different communities, and I am working in the United States. You all are based here. There's an aspect of love the one you're with. This is what I've got, but we all sell products globally. So does that mean that we should be uh, using the most conservative approach? You know, the safety flags, the that are most aggressive. That could be a way. I know that working at Orange, the French telco, GDPR was very important, but Orange is a huge company where we had a lot of work in West and North Africa and the Middle East. And in countries that did not have GDPR style laws yet, we said we're going to adhere to the most aggressive protections, most privacy enforcing, no matter where a customer is. And I think that having nations and the EU, individual nations, I mean, California, individual states, individual nations chime in and say, hey, this is what we're hearing from our constituents, and this is what is a priority to us, is a really important step to help create some of these, to have the shared conversations and to create a better understanding of what we all think is primary. There is going to be a lot of stuff we disagree on, but the thing that makes the recent AI innovations so powerful is that they're using language in an extremely naturalistic way. And communication is what differentiates humans. Our level of communication, talking about what we need, what we want, our desires. The data that LLMs are based on is very interesting, but it was also, for the vast majority of the cases, not generated specifically for LLMs. It was people talking about their meal in a Yelp review. It was someone ranting about a Marvel movie on Reddit. It was, like it was beautifully human. And so we are going to have a lot of reflections of that humanity in our generated language, but it's also a way for us to step back and say, communication is for us. What are we getting out of it? How do we evaluate what is safe and what are the community mores that we want to adhere to?
And a lot of the content that these models have been trained on is largely Western, does have a Western slant.
Yes.
Can you speak to, and especially, I think you've written a paper on low resource languages and the
Yes.
challenges thereafter. So, how do you deal with that? I mean, you've written a paper actually on the data infrastructure for low resource languages. Can you
Yes,
speak to that a little bit?
I can, but I really want to I appreciate your question about how do we, I think in the Bay Area you would say optimize. How do you optimize for all of these different trust and safety regulations? No. How do we look at them? How do we do a good survey? Look at them and find out what works best for us. But what works best for us is going to bleed on to other communities. Like we are not in a vacuum. Now, to your point about the perspectivist and English centricness of a lot of these systems goes back to the car analogy, where if we have systems that are just built in English or just thinking of personas, these agile methodology personas are Western centric, then it makes sense that they don't work for everyone. Now, there are two main I'm going to say two main philosophies, but I think this could be a fun way for you to have some contentious feedback. Um, Data is the fuel to build large language models. When you have a primarily spoken language, an oral language, as opposed to a written language, you are going to have less data, at least right now, where historically this has been text to text and some text to speech, but we have less speech to text data. And I think Sam has worked in this domain at Dragon, so he really understands that there's the phonemes, some of the stepping stones are not uh, automatic, but again, these are areas that technically we're kind of moving through in a very interesting way. Now, when you have oral traditions, you often don't have a standard orthography or way that that language is then written. And the Western keyboard itself may not align with that orthography, right? So there are a lot of challenges. And a keyboard is associated with a laptop. What about people using their phones? And so, what does real language use look like globally? It is code switching, it is neologisms, people making new words from that are a blend of words from different languages, different cultures. And I think Reddit is a really good example, right? It's actually how people speak. It's the vernacular of the young and the tech savvy and even in globally of the wealthy, people who have the technology to record their thoughts and communicate with others with technology. Now, the gathering more data, that was my first non contentious comment, is really important, and there's a lot of ways to do that. And I have worked in this area, and I support a lot of researchers who who are doing amazing work, and I'm very lucky to be in an ecosystem that has gotten more traction in the last few years. The other aspect of low resource languages is that in the West, especially, we have given over to a little bit of the horse has left the barn in terms of AI is just here and your data is out there. And some communities are not happy with that, and they view their language as sacred. And there's religious and heavily historical underpinnings to how their language is controlled. And I want to, as someone who is not from one of these communities, but grew up around a lot of people who were, I respect the nuances that I will never understand because I'm from a dominant colonial language, right? The language that I speak best, besides Python, is uh is English. Now, if the solution to turning a low resource language into a high resource language is to just have more of it, and you could say, well, right now, people in my community who speak Bambara or Wolof, if they speak English or French, they can use all of the software engineering tools and they can build um, great products and they can have generational wealth, right? But what if they could do that in their own language and they didn't have to hopscotch to another language? That would be fantastic because it's not my spot or anyone's spot to gatekeep someone who is driven and smart to do whatever they would like with these tools. And I think that access is a right. But I also believe that the difference between my relationship with language and, as I said, some of the community members that I've met is very different. And I believe that there should be ways for people to deplatform Indigenous, First Nation data if they would like. And what does that mean? It means if there's less of that specific language data in the crawls that the Common Crawl uses that are when they do these crawls of the internet, if there's less of that specific language, then it's harder to identify it. It's harder to model it, and then harder to identify it. And so it's harder to find it to perhaps say, hey, do you want this removed? The flip side is that uh, to Sajad's point, we're kind of steamrolling. You know, this Western philosophy is very steamrolling in terms of do we reduce culture and language, or do we use this as a way to allow people to express themselves as they would like?
Just
I have a
in
question.
this regard, right? Sajad in one of the podcasts did talk about this, right? I mean, because the internet data is basically most of it is English in nature, right?
Yeah.
But then you also have other languages, especially some of the Chinese models which are coming out today, right?
Yeah.
The question we were really trying to understand was, are these models are really able to handle all the nuances of say an English-based model, right? It's not, right? So the most interesting thing there is when you're talking about these low resource models, I really think what does the public need to know about AI reliability, right? In terms of and the industry isn't saying plainly. What is it that you feel needs to be told?
Um, Maybe this speaks to Damon's expertise, but on some level, our interactions with products and companies is about brand marketing and brand trust, right? When I make a purchasing decision or when I think about, which LLM I'm going to use, this is based on reputation and earned,
Just like anything else, absolutely.
just like anything else.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sorry, could you, there's an explosion outside my window. Could you please repeat the question?
Party outside?
Well, it made the chickens go crazy. My neighbor's chickens. And so I hear these bombs and then I hear the chickens.
We don't hear anything on our side, so no.
Oh, that's so funny. Oh no, and this is going to be in the live. Oh,
Well, I
I'm
do have a question for you. Given your work with
yeah.
The Global South and AI Luminate, do you think that the way to democratize and still keep culture of these resource and less used languages and culture is for them to develop their own open source models.
Or have a
And
sovereign, like a sovereign
yeah,
name. Yeah.
and to do that, there is a cost in compute for training and
Yeah.
inference to do that. Is it, I don't know, is it economically viable, or is there going to have to be some sort of a United Nations kind of coalition that helps and funds these type of initiatives?
That's a fantastic question. And I believe in 2017, I read um, an Accenture report on AI adoption. So this is so it was late 2010s, and it was pre ChatGPT dropping. So
Mm,
the normalization and accessibility of LLM products. And it basically said the amount of tax money, corporate money, and nonprofit money going to AI in different geographic regions is so unbalanced and the wealth that is being created is so profound that we're going to have AI change in the near future where if these companies continue to generate this kind of wealth and have such an economic and technical leg up, that much of the world would not actually be able to afford to buy the products that they're selling, right? And
mm,
so um, I think that ship has passed, has sailed, right? And I do
mm,
wonder if some of these countries need to get together and create a sovereign open source models, maybe the UN, maybe just different regions, and figure out what is
mm,
most important to them. I I'm not sure if that's a blanket solution to every community, but I do think that I know it, for example, in Mali, they have of late, and this is a nation that's very impoverished. It is a French ex-colony. They have, I think, one of the highest birth rates per woman, almost 6 children the average woman has. Um, very, very, um, it's a part of the global South, but it has a lot of challenges, but it's also
mm,
um, really leaned in to aspects of independence, such as investing in a Ministry of Language and trying to figure out how to differentiate um, past past generations' adherence to using French as a way to move up the economic ladder and as a vehicular language, as opposed to investing in teaching and standardization of local indigenous, low resource languages, right? So
mm,
how do we say we're going to build more language tools, which then create more that support data collection, and then we can use that data down the road to build our own models. That's one that's I don't think there's a blanket solution, Damon, but I think it's a really interesting challenge.
yeah, it seems like we're going to have a. I don't know if you read the paper Euro 2031. Have you
Mm-mm.
seen
But
that?
is that talking about similar stuff?
Yeah, and it kind of paints it's forward looking, and the basic conclusions are that there's this duopoly that's between the U.S. and the foundation models in AI, and
Yeah.
China with the physical presence in AI, and then everybody else who doesn't have the money to invest in compute for training and inference is kind of left to choose one partner or the other,
Yeah.
right? And it does, the conclusions are that if you don't start now and you think about partnering
Yeah.
and working together to build compute that's very expensive, that you'll be left in the dust,
Yeah.
by 2031.
I think that speaks to some of the same concerns, and I thought it was interesting how prescient those ideas
Mm-hmm.
of this isn't just about these companies, it's about where they're based, who they're hiring, where they're paying for power. We've all heard about the environmental challenges. This isn't just about using these tools. It's about how to build infrastructure to
Right.
support the compute, to, fresh water. Fresh water is the secret sauce to many of these systems.
Mm.
I think one of the things that we need to remember in the United States is that the technology companies that are doing very well, many of them are based on research that was government funded post World War II. This is um, this is, military based communication, really, really crucial infrastructure that in the post-war era, we had a different relationship with, how we looked at technology um, a way of getting ahead. Like this really was kind of a peacetime war. And there was a lot of investment and a lot of, my grandparents' tax money, for example, went into building some of these systems that the internet, that Google, that Amazon have really leveraged and made a lot of money off of. And so
GPS. Yeah. Right.
all of the, I mean, we could list, I know we're not supposed to mention certain companies, but it's the big ones. And to some degree, that shows the long-term wealth of our nation and the perspective that they said, hey, this is something that we want to invest in. Why are some of our translation systems better at Russian and Arabic than at other languages?
Mm.
There's geopolitical reasons why. But that doesn't mean that this needs to stay, this is our customers are everywhere, right? What happens if we have this kind of situation that calcifies?
Mhm.
And if these customers can't afford to pay what these products cost because the ecosystems that have made them are so expensive.
Mm.
Switching topics a little bit, can you speak to, I think a lot of these companies are now starting to build moderation models.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think a few are available even on Hugging Face.
Hmm.
And not all of them are set to be ML Commons benchmarked. They
Yes.
might be running them internally, but we haven't seen evidence of them saying, hey, this is how much we scored on these benchmarks. There's no such leaderboard. Can you speak to that whole leaderboard and the need to encourage people to run their models over these benchmarks? What do you think of that?
And define moderation model.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So I think as a fan of science, I like this concept of a leaderboard. And I really do think that the best leaderboard ever was, what was that, the Netflix challenge
Yes.
20 years ago. So just if anyone is not aware, basically Netflix said we're going to give $1 million bounty to the person that can increase the prediction algorithm for
The
someone
recommendation
liking.
algorithm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the recommendation algorithm for someone liking something,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
prediction was, would you like to watch this? And the goal was 10%. And so it was an interesting bounty, and there were all these folks who were competing in it. And and then there was a little bit of a message board popped up, and people started, no one was getting close to this threshold.
Mm.
And so people started chatting and working together. And then they realized, I think the language did not say individual, it said team. And they actually, and so the folks who built a team, and I also like this because this is a little bit of the true narrative of how companies and great ideas come to fruition is through teamwork. We have a little bit of the hero,
Mm.
the Joseph Campbell, uh, rise of the hero quest. But um, the so a leaderboard was really helpful and it pushed science, right? Is this can I get a result? Is it replicable? and Hugging Face supporting this ecosystem is fantastic. Now, having we've also now um oversampled we're pardon me, we're over indexing on leaderboards. Now everything has a leaderboard.
Yeah.
So I want to support the scientific methods insofar as hypothesis, research, experiments, uh, analysis, rinse and repeat. But I think it's important to think about the personas using these leaderboards and how they're helping people make decisions, right? And so, Sajad, was your question, what is the what is the leaderboard?
Yeah, we haven't
Are they
seen.
good? Or are they good, or should we be concerned that some of these models are not opening themselves up to leaderboards?
Yes, I've not seen. Yeah, I think my point was, my observation, rather more than a point, was that I think some of these companies are using the ML Commons benchmark
Yeah.
internally, but they're not openly publishing where they stand on it.
Yes.
Nor have I seen a public leaderboard that says this is where this company stands or this model stands.
Hmm.
I think, increasingly, if you're focused on building trust and safety and with a focus on ethics, it would be prudent at least to conceive a leaderboard that consumers can then compare, contrast, and say, this is what I
I
want.
agree. Kind of like a Consumer Reports, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that is accessible. I I think that having buy-in in a consortium where there is investment, kind of like a W3C or awareness of ISO standards, this notion of standardization or evaluation, benchmarking, um, the US government has done work with NIST. Uh, that was their, standards and measurement group, has been successful in the past. And in fact, the IBM Watson Jeopardy challenge came out of some of the NIST benchmarking challenges. To people who are chess fans, think of the Big Blue style challenges. Some of these
Mhm.
have underpinnings in um, government sponsored competitions. But I wonder, and so I'm pro having these be consortia based of that are academic uh, companies, the big companies are involved in. And I agree with you. I think many, if not all, are using ML Commons AI Luminate internally. I think there are other standards that they're using internally. Think of this as part of your development cycle. How can you tell if your recent um, uh, code you've done all these bug fixes. Are things really working? Is your output improving? But I also understand that this is a competitive landscape, and a lot of companies may not see the value. And the personas that are using these benchmarks, maybe not everyone is using them to make large scale purchasing decisions. There are some people
So,
who are not as interested in trust and safety.
So, Sarah, in
uh,
that regard, right, who should hold the
Sam, if
grading?
you can
Yeah.
make it real quick because we're running out of
Oh, yeah,
time.
sure. Who should hold the grading pen, Sarah? In that case, the lab, the standards body, or the third party with no commercial stake? What's the failure mode on each? You are the expert
I
here.
I mean, I do believe in human in the loop evaluation since these are products that are for us. We get so excited about AGI.
Yeah.
Woohoo, AGI. These are these are for us. Did we forget that somewhere? This is about communication. And we all know that communication is so flawed, right? I'm thinking something, I'm feeling something, I'm thinking something. I'm using all my senses and it still comes out in, probably 90% correct a version of whatever language I'm speaking, and yet we understand, right? So who should be in charge? I think a group, not one person, a group of people with different perspectives who all are having like 90% quality output, right? Because that can help us with, what we call inter-annotator agreement, IA from a human in the loop perspective, but can also make sure that we're asking the right questions. Whose voices aren't in the room? one of the challenges with doing evaluation of, say, hate speech and defamation is that some of these terms are very offensive to some groups, but a lot of people are not aware of those terms, which is great. I don't, if we could have fewer knowledge of hateful terms, maybe there'll be less of them out there. But that doesn't mean that they aren't extremely
Right.
offensive to some people. And that means that you have to be able to know a wide range of harmful terms.
Thank you,
And it's
Sarah, for
constantly
joining.
changing. We're
It
humans.
is
We're
absolutely.
constantly going to find new
Language changes every
ways.
day, right?
Yeah, yeah. So
So
consortium made up of many people with different perspectives from these different communities.
Thank you. It's great.
So thanks to Dr. Sarah Luger for joining us. Really
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks,
the
Dr.
conversation.
Luger.
Very thought-provoking. And I forgot to mention that I usually do at the beginning, all opinions are of the individuals themselves and not necessarily of any company that they work for. So thank you, Sarah. If you could hang out for just a second and we can chat after the meeting here. It's gonna...
Thank you.